whatever he needs, all of the church's riches to fund his army to fight back. The words of the patriarch move Heraclius. He thinks back to great emperors like Justinian and Constantine, who rose to the occasion to save the empire when it was in its greatest danger. The emperor's duty is to defend his people until his last breath. Even when the odds are stacked against him, he cannot run back and turns his attention to Egypt. For the next several years, as if forgetting the plot, the Persians forget Constantinople and instead methodically seize the Egyptian province town by town. And this gives Heraclius just enough breathing room to start planning to just a strip of land around Constantinople. But with the church and his people behind him, it is now or never. Defending themselves have only allowed the Persians to push them further and further back. They have nothing left to give up. So Heraclius decides to switch his strategy from defense to offense. If the time of the Romans is to end, it will end on their terms. They will die on their swords. He melts down any precious metal he can find in the city to fund the war, and soon every citizen becomes involved in the war effort. They all understand how serious it is, and that they're all fighting for their survival. As Sharbaraz takes Alexandria and marches down the Nile, working to cut off the food supply from Constantinople, Heraclius carefully studies Maurice's Strategicon, the manual of war and strategy written by the former emperor, and he and his men train relentlessly, day by day transforming into a well-honed fighting machine. Their numbers are small, just enough soldiers to form one last Roman legion, but they've found strength in their emperor's leadership. He tells them that they're the last defenders of Rome, and upon hearing this, they vow to fight with him to the end. Finally, 9 years after the humiliating defeat at Antioch, Heraclius makes his move. On April 4th, 622 CE, he leaves Constantinople. He turns and looks back at the city walls, realizing this may be the last time he ever sees them. He takes a deep breath, and then, holding up an icon of Christ for his soldiers to see, they set out to regain his empire or die trying. His legion is well trained, but they have no replacements or reinforcements. If he loses a single battle, it'll be the end of the Romans. He must be flawless. The fate of the empire rests on his shoulders. He marches into Anatolia, and he leads his legion into an epic battle with the army of Sharbaraz. Heraclius commands his men from the front lines, and together they fight with everything they've got. Sharbaraz is caught off guard by the dramatic improvement of the Roman troops. He loses the battle and is forced to retreat. Having finally achieved his first victory against the Persians, Heraclius quickly pushes onward. He marches on to the small town of Ganzak, where he's surprised to go head-to-head against Khosrow II himself. The Persian king had decided to personally lead an army to battle. The Persians have never controlled this much land or been this wealthy. If he can beat Heraclius here, he can keep everything they've taken and be remembered as the greatest Persian king of all time. But Heraclius will not be denied, and he smashes Khosrow's army, forcing him to retreat. After the battle, Heraclius visits one of the 3 great Zoroastrian fire temples, which was located nearby. As revenge for Jerusalem, he orders it destroyed. The Romans celebrate around the burning temple. The underdogs are fighting back! From that point on, Heraclius seems unable to lose. In February 625 CE, he launches a night raid on Sharbaraz's camp, and the general, who is naked at the time, barely escapes. At the Sarus River, when Sharbaraz's troops try to prevent the Romans from crossing the bridge, Heraclius personally leads the charge. The Romans storm the bridge, routing the Persians, who are caught off guard by soldiers willing to charge headfirst toward their firing archers. Under Heraclius' command, his men fight as if unafraid into Chalcedon, just outside Constantinople. They've coordinated with the Slavs to the north, who have assembled an army to attack the city from the other direction. And soon Constantinople finds itself surrounded by 80,000 hostile troops, with Heraclius and his legion far away from home, deep in Persian territory. Heraclius is torn. He's made huge progress, but if he were to rush back to the capital, he would give back all of his gains to Khosrow. If he doesn't return, Constantinople could fall, and that would be the end of the empire itself. After deep reflection, he decides to press on into Persian territory, continuing his offense, leaving the capital in the hands of the defenders there. If their city is truly the city of God, he will protect its walls, and they will not fall. The Slavs, along with their Avar allies, begin their attack in 626, and the city is sieged for a month, but through each assault, the walls hold. people in the city begin to believe that they are truly being protected by the hand of God. And the defenders a few weeks ago, his army had finally won a massive victory against some Slavic invaders. And after years of brutal fighting, the Roman soldiers were excited to return home to rest and celebrate the win. But Maurice, he had other plans. He thought it would be better, and cheaper, if the army stayed up there in the Balkans over the winter instead of coming home. And the troops did not like that idea one bit. They marched back to Constantinople, and under the orders of an officer named Phocas, take control of the capital city. Phocas then brutally murders the emperor's sons and kills Maurice himself. With no one of royal lineage left alive, he declares himself the new emperor. Phocas then proceeds to speedrun his way to becoming one of the worst rulers the Romans had ever seen. His people live in fear, and anyone who questions his authority is tortured. And King Khosrow II regained his throne after he was overthrown by one of his generals. And through this act, Emperor Maurice and Khosrow had actually become friends. This strange friendship ended the bitter rivalry between the Byzantines and Persians and brought peace and stability to the region for the first time in centuries. But when Khosrow hears that Maurice has been murdered, he thinks that maybe he doesn't want to honor the peace deal with the guy instantly reigniting the dormant war between the Byzantines and the Persians. He places his army under the command of his most skilled general, Sharbaraz, who quickly begins to wreak havoc in the easternmost Byzantine cities. In response, Phocas prepares to defend his lands, but he quickly proves himself a terrible leader. His troops lose battle after battle, and by 608 CE, just a few years after he took the throne, the empire is completely falling apart. A large chunk of the Balkans to the north had been captured by the Slavs, and Mesopotamia and much of Syria had fallen to Sharbaraz and the Persians. The Romans are on the ropes and on the verge of being completely snuffed out from history. They begin to pray for a miracle, a hero to save them. And this 10 CE, a rebel army from the northern African provinces began their march to Constantinople. They're led by a man named Heraclius, the son of the governor of Carthage. He'd had enough of watching Phocas f*** up the empire, and he believes he has what it takes to save it. When he arrives at the capital city, he's shocked to see the condition of its people. The once proud Romans are starving and filled with fear. Upon seeing Heraclius, the imperial guard, run by Phocas's own brother-in-law, bring the emperor kicking and screaming to the rebel army. Heraclius is so appalled at the lack of loyalty among Phocas's men that he asks, "Is this how you have ruled the empire?" Phocas stares back in contempt and says, "And will you rule it any better?" Oh, shit! It's really going at me. With Phocas gone, the church crowns Heraclius the new emperor, and he immediately sets out to make peace with the Sassanid Persians. He's pretty hopeful since he's removed Maurice's murderer and all, but unfortunately for him, after taking so much Byzantine land, Khosrow had pretty much forgotten about avenging his friend and now just wants to rule the entire area. Khosrow refuses to call off his invasion, and Heraclius is forced to fight to defend what's left of the empire. He chooses to personally lead his army into battle, the first emperor to fight on the front lines in over 2 centuries. His advisors are completely against the idea. But to Heraclius, all the Byzantine generals have been doing a shit job against the Persians, so he has no choice and has to do it himself. He leads nearly the entire Roman army to the city of Antioch in 613 CE and faces off against the Persian forces under the command of General Sharbaraz. Heraclius knows that this is his shot. Win here, and he'll prove to everyone that he really is the hero that they were praying for. He'll restore the Roman Empire to glory and drive off the Persians for good. Confidently, he strides into battle and he loses terribly. It's not even close. His troops are routed, Antioch is brutally looted, and Heraclius barely escapes alive. His gamble of bringing almost his entire army into battle ends in complete disaster. He loses a ton of men, and the Persians are one step closer to wiping out the once mighty Roman Empire. Heraclius retreats to Constantinople in a panic, while Sharbaraz continues to take more and more land. The Persians overrun Damascus just a few months after Antioch, slaying and enslaving Christian civilians by the thousands. The following year, they take Jerusalem with almost no resistance. Sharbaraz sets the Church of the Holy Sepulchre ablaze and takes the true cross, the most holy relic in Christianity, back to Khosrow as a gift. In Constantinople, the people hear the news from Jerusalem and begin to fear that this was a sign that God had deserted them. Sensing weakness, the Slavs in the north completely overrun the Byzantine territory in the Balkans. The Goths also see their opportunity to seize Spain, and the following year, Sharbaraz fights his way back to Chalcedon and takes the city. The Persians are now right outside the gates of Constantinople, and not knowing what to do, Heraclius begins praying to God for an answer. When he had left Carthage, he was convinced it was his destiny to restore the empire, to defeat the Persians, but in the end, he wasn't good enough. He had tried, and he had failed. At this low point, Heraclius begins to think over all of his options. Maybe he could offer whatever's left of the empire to the Persians and become a vassal state. But as these thoughts are going through his mind, he receives a letter from Khosrow, and it's the ultimate diss track of the era. In this letter, the Persian king is really rubbing it in, talking about all the losses Heraclius had suffered and how it's only a matter of time before he comes for him. This makes Heraclius feel even worse, and he considers running away from it all and moving the capital city from Constantinople to Carthage. He even begins loading ships to abandon the city, but is stopped by the Patriarch of Constantinople, who was kind of like the Pope of the Eastern Church. He brings Heraclius to the Hagia Sophia, and in this most holiest of places, thanking her for her protection. It was at this point that Khosrow, frustrated by the string of recent failures, does what all horrible bosses do and starts blaming his failures on his team. He writes a letter ordering the execution of Sharbaraz. His trusted general has been losing too many information to his advantage. He adds the names of 400 Persian officers to the list, and then delivers the letter to Sharbaraz. When the Persian general reads the orders, his face darkens in anger. He and his army had fought for their king for almost a decade, and this is their reward? He gathers his men and informs them of Khosrow's treachery, and together they collectively decide to leave the war. Suddenly, the Persian king had lost not only his best general, but his largest army as well. Against all odds, Heraclius finds himself a battle away from pulling off the greatest comeback in history. But time is running short, as winter is quickly approaching. Fighting into winter may risk his men starving to death. The smart move would be to pull back, recharge, and wait until spring to fight again. His soldiers are exhausted after months of intense fighting, but the Persians are the weakest they've ever been. They're barely hanging on, and now the Romans actually outnumber them. They could end this war once and for all with a single decisive battle. But is there enough time on the clock? Play it safe and risk giving the Persians time to regroup, or risk everything now and try to deliver the knockout blow? Heraclius sits alone in his tent, trying to make a decision that could determine the fate of his empire. Within a day, he makes up his mind. He'll risk it all for the chance to take out Khosrow here and now. And so, as winter begins to chill the land, the Romans continue to push into Persian territory. And on December 12, 627 CE, Heraclius draws the Persians into a trap by feigning a retreat near the ruins of Nineveh. The Persians chase after the Romans, and on command, the Romans turn on them and brutal hand-to-hand combat begins. The Romans begin to gain the upper hand, and sensing this, the Persian general Razad calls out to Heraclius, challenging him to solo combat in the middle of the battlefield. If he's able to kill the emperor, the Persians would be the ultimate winners of the near decade-long war. Heraclius steps forward, unafraid, and accepts the challenge. The two generals charge at each other, and Heraclius defeats Razad with a single blow. Two more warriors quickly challenge the emperor, but he cuts them down as well. Without their commander, the Persian troops panic and begin to flee, and the Romans rout and cut down 6,000 Persian soldiers who attempt to run away. The Persian army is now nearly completely decimated, and Heraclius pushes closer and closer to Khosrow. He travels to Dastagir, right outside the Persian capital, and burns down Khosrow's summer palace. Then he offers peace to the Persians, proposing that his empire be fully restored. But despite the near annihilation of his forces, Khosrow rejects this peace. He had fought too hard against him, backed by nearly the entire Persian nobility. They understand that there's no use continuing to fight against Heraclius and his army, and Khosrow is unceremoniously executed by his own son. Kavad II quickly accepts Heraclius' offer, and he returns all the land his father had taken: Palestine, Syria, Mesopotamia, and in the blink of an eye, the Eastern Roman Empire is restored to its former glory. Kavad II also returns the True Cross, signaling the end of the centuries-long conflict. The Sassanid Empire quickly falls into a civil war and begins to destroy itself from the inside out. Heraclius and his men return to Constantinople, and as they enter the city, the people erupt into celebration. His subjects line the streets with tears in their eyes and bow down to the man who has saved them all. They gaze as Heraclius and his men carry the true cross to the Hagia Sophia, where they affix it to its roof as proof of their triumph over the Sassanid Empire. For weeks, the people of Constantinople celebrate the return of their hero, their emperor, Heraclius. Heraclius later travels to Jerusalem and personally returns the true cross to its rightful home, a moment that should have been a glorious final chapter in the story of a hero. And in fact, had Heraclius passed away right then and there, he would forever have been remembered as one of the greatest Roman generals of all time. His name would be included with the likes of Julius Caesar and Scipio. But fate had a different plan, and he lived on, and in a few short years his legacy would be forever tarnished. See, his total victory over the Sassanid Persians had opened the door for a new, much more powerful foe to emerge in the region. In the vacuum caused by the collapse of the Zoroastrian Sassanid Empire, a prophet named Muhammad would quickly build a following, and his teachings would bring about not just a new empire, but a new religion that would ultimately bring constant